From the first word revealed in the Quran, read, to the multiple inventions and advances in science, to the immensely rich legacy left by classic scholars, it is clear that Islam places an emphasis on learning and the seeking of knowledge that's absolutely unrivaled. But what does an Islamic education actually look like? What impact has it made on the world as we know it today? In episode 1, we looked at knowledge and how the Muslim attitude towards seeking knowledge set the foundations for it becoming the greatest civilization in the world. Over the next few videos, we'll take a look at how they formalized that knowledge and created an amazing education system that created successful students and subsequently scholars who changed the world. To set some context, let's look at what education was like in pre-Islamic Arabia. So first of all, they didn't have a literary education, so very few people could read and write. According to the polymath scholar Ibn Khaldun, the Arabs had no art and no science. Their education for their youth mostly consisted of teaching their young to be warriors or traders. They also admired poetry and deemed it to be the craft that distinguished the nobility of the common folk, and it brought great prestige and honour to the one who could express themselves using this form. After the revelation came down to the Prophet ﷺ, that began a journey of 23 years of teaching to his companions and followers. The first 13 years in Mecca, with the remaining 10 in Medina. Naturally, there were not many formal institutions in Mecca, given the severity of the challenges facing Muslims at the time. However, the very first seat of Islamic learning was called Dar al-Arqam, which was near the foothills of Mount Safa in Mecca. Arqam ibn Abu Arqam was one of the companions, and his house was used by the Messenger ﷺ to teach Muslims about their religion. It was done in secret, and the instructions were quite basic compared to what came later in Medina. It was mostly matters of belief and stories of ancient people and prophets. In Medina, once they had established themselves, the Prophet would personally devote much of his time to teaching and taught his companions and followers daily. The curriculum became much more sophisticated to cover societal and legal matters, for starters. According to Anas, he would repeat things 3 times so that people could understand it. He also ensured he taught at suitable times and to not have long sessions so people wouldn't get bored or lose their enthusiasm for further learning. The Prophet ﷺ also gave women the right to learn as equals for the very first time. Although the Prophet would allocate certain times in the week where he would teach women, according to a narration by Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, some women requested that the Prophet ﷺ would fix a full day for them, as the men were taking all of his time. On that, he promised them 1 full day for religious lessons and commandments. So there were 2 types of teaching established at this point: Halakha and Rihala. The Halakas were found in every mosque, and they consisted of several study circles, so named because the teacher was seated on a cushion with the pupils gathered in a semicircle before him. The more advanced the student, the closer he was seated to the teacher. The mosque circles varied in approach, in terms of course content, in terms of size, in terms of quality of teaching, but the method of instruction usually emphasized lectures and memorization. Some circles, especially those in which the Hadith were studied, were so large that it was necessary for assistants to repeat the lecture so that every student could hear and record it. During the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ, there are at least 9 mosques in Medina, and all of these had study circles which provided education for the locals. The Prophet actually encouraged each mosque to have their own study circle to avoid overcrowding at the central mosque where he taught, but also so children could have education near to them so they didn't want to have to travel too far. Rihala, which means journey or quest, was where students would make long journeys to join the circle of a great teacher. Travelling in search of knowledge was already heavily practiced in societies such as Persia, Rome and China, but Rihala was popularised as everyone wished to visit the Prophet ﷺ himself and to learn directly from him in Medina. According to Ibn Abbas, an envoy from every tribe of Arabia came to the Prophet and inquired about Islam and acquired knowledge of the Islamic sciences from him. In the first century after Hijrah, as Islam spread far and wide, more and more people visited the companions and their successors to learn, and they can now visit not only just Medina, but other learning hubs such as Kufa, Basra, Damascus and Jerusalem. Abu Ayyub, for example, travelled from Medina all the way to Egypt just to refresh his memory on a hadith which he, together with Uqba ibn Amir, had learned from the Prophet himself. After the passing of the Prophet, Islamic literature became filled with educational theories. Caliph Umar ibn Khattab said that children should be taught subjects such as poetry, history and the social sciences, which would guarantee the success of society, as well as the physical education subjects that the Prophet stressed upon in terms of horsemanship, archery and swimming. As Ibn Abbas developed advanced teaching classes, he also came up with the notion of free periods to give to students to do whatever they wanted to do in between lectures. Ibn Abbas was very conscious of attention, and he also had the quote, "Teach only for as long as the students look at you, with their eyes fully open, but once they start to turn away from you, their attention is strayed." Hazrat Ali emphasized the importance of discussion and review of the students' lessons to ensure that the student had not forgotten or made a mistake in their understanding. Ali would also stress on the idea of a question and answer session in particular. Hazrat Ali said of question and answer sessions that knowledge is a treasure and its keys are the question asked. So ask questions. As the question is rewarded by its answer, so too is the person who asked the question, his teacher, the listener and the bystander.